countries. 75% of energy resources. 70% of the world's GDP. $54 million square kilometers. 18 terrestrial ecosystems. 12 time zones. 2 parts of the world. One great Eurasia.
Good morning and welcome to the 11th Eurasian Economic Forum. This is an important appointment. It has become a fundamental appointment, an exchange of opportunities, in particular business opportunities. I'm here as a chairperson. You know that RAI, the Italian state television, has always paid a lot of attention to this forum. Many of its journalists have taken part in it. And I'm very happy to continue this tradition by chairing the first 2 panels of the day. And we start a bit late, and we apologize for this. And this is the reason why I won't take too much of your time. And actually, I'll ask immediately Matteo Salvini, the Vice President of the Council of Ministers, to say a few words and welcome the audience. Thank you.
Grazie a tutti.
Thank you. It was a pleasure and an honor for me to take the first early flight this morning in Rome, even though we've had so many problems being tackled on the issues of economics, integration, business. But it was an honor, as I was saying, to take this flight, to come here and thank all of you, because this is a moment of economic growth, and because this is an audience, let me use words that are not so common in a business forum, but this is an audience of peacemakers, because you work in favor of constructing peace, building peace, because in 2018 we don't need sanctions, we don't need troops, we need friendship, we need dialogue, we need friendship. And I would like to thank the Italian entrepreneurs, the Italian business people, in particular from Veneto, for resisting, for taking up the right approach to this. And I wish you all the best of growth on behalf of the Italian government, the whole of the Italian government, and our own personal commitment is to go on, to carry forward, because there is no stability that can meet our goals. We want to grow, and we have many infrastructures, roads that are being built. There are people who are working so as to reduce energy costs, and that would make our people save in their energy bills. And I would like to thank all of you for really doing the best in the last 11 years. And so I wish you a fruitful day, 2 days actually, and I hope that next year we will meet in a more distended framework, because disputes in 2018 should be settled around a table and not by talking about tanks, confrontations, or even worse, conflicts. Thank you very much.
Grazie, Ministro Salvini.
Thank you, Minister Salvini. Now we have a very, very important guest from Moscow, Igor Sechin, who is the president and CEO of an important company, actually, a company we know very well, Rosneft, and President Sechin will read a message by the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. Thank you.
Позвольте представить приветствие президента Российской Федерации.
Let me first of all read the message by the President of the Russian Federation addressed to the participants again and guests of the 11th Eurasian Forum in Verona. Dear friends, I welcome you and I greet you wholeheartedly as a participant really in this economic forum in Verona, which is one of the best and most beautiful cities in Europe. The economic forum has gained a remarkable reputation, in the business community, and the most difficult questions of the European agenda are being discussed. Today's topic are economy of trust and the diplomacy of business from Atlantic to Pacific. This mirrors the need we are experiencing to increase, enhance development, friendship in the field of energy, because we think that energy should be exempted as a sector from sanctions and other problems, and the Russian part is very ready to make its part. I'm very sure that your debate will be fruitful, new ideas will be brought to light, and I wish you all the best and a very, very fruitful two-day meeting. Thank you very much. Signed by Vladimir Putin. Thank you very much, President Sechin, for this message by the President of the Russian Federation. As you said, Verona is one of the best and most beautiful cities in Europe. Whenever we come to Verona, are really awestruck by its beauty. And our host is the mayor of Verona, Federico Sboarina, whom I ask to say a few welcoming remarks.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning. Let me welcome all of you here. It's really an honor for me and for the city I'm at the head of. It's really an honor for me to welcome you. This is one of Professor Fallico's preachers, as it were. And last year, from this very podium, I said that I wanted Verona to become the opening gate of Russia, for Russia and Eurasia to Italy. And after 1 year, I can say that Verona is the gate, the access gate for Russia and Eurasia to Italy. And my first expression of gratitude goes to the Russian entrepreneurs, politicians, and friends. I would like to extend my gratitude to the Vice President of the Council, Salvini, and Minister of Home Affairs, and also to Lorenzo Fontana, the Minister of the Family. And his presence here testifies to the attention that the Italian government is paying to Russia and the Russian world. And I would like to thank the organizers, in particular President Fallico, whom I have mentioned earlier on, because, as you said, and as has been said, you will be talking about the geopolitical and economic future of these two platforms, the European and Eurasian, actually, platforms. And the goal, as Minister Salvini said, is to enhance cooperation, increase business, irrespective of sanctions. Last year I said, and this has to be unfortunately repeated, last year I said that because of sanctions, we are making steps backwards because sanctions are putting the brakes, as it were, on entrepreneurs. The opposite should be true. I think that politics should help, should promote, should make business people open up to the world, to the Asian community, to the Russian community. And Verona is the first city in terms of trade exchange, Italian city, of course, with Russia. And I think that the world of politics should promote this type of trade, this type of exchanges. In the next 2 days, you are going to discuss about this, really. And as a mayor of this extraordinary, outstanding city, I would like to highlight and to repeat what I said. Verona wants to be and is the access gate for Russia. They should feel at home. Russian business people should feel at home here because this is their home. And Verona's business people want to enjoy a good environment which allows them to exchange, to entertain fruitful relationships with Russia. And actually the number of flights from Verona to Russia has increased remarkably, and this has also increased the tourist flows. Verona is a city which is full of monuments, of sightseeing. Juliet and Romeo is located, as it were, in Verona. We have the Arena, the largest open-air theatre in the world, and each summer we have a wonderful opera festival. And this year we've had many guests from Russia. Then we've got also an extraordinary and outstanding business community in the agro-food sector, but not only, in other businesses as well, in other industries as well. Verona has an international vocation, an ambition, and in doing so, Verona has already identified Russia as a main partner because the Russian excellence industries are in line, match the Verona ones, and thanks to our own tradition, to our own history, we can say that we have had a long-lasting friendship connecting us. And for example, we have a show of Romeo and Juliet on the ice, and the event was covered by Russian media. And together with this, we've got Russian seasons in Italy, and this is one of the initiatives that really have been organized to improve our relationships. And that and many other events are embodying what our two peoples can build if they are together. There are huge opportunities for us to grasp if we really build this network of relationships, of fruitful interaction. And I would like to thank Professor Fallico for giving a fundamental contribution to this end. And I would like to conclude by saying that I'm really honored. I'm so proud to be here and open this work sessions. I hope that your sessions are going to trigger a further increase in the relationship between our countries. And I have a special wish for myself and my own city. Tomorrow, the forum, of course, will come to an end. And when something is concluded, the limelights will go off. But actually, I want that the limelights, the lights really are still on. I hope they remain on to make light on the road that connects Verona with Russia and Russia with Verona. Thank you very much.
Lasciatemi cantare con la chitarra in mano, lasciatemi cantare una canzone piano piano.
Da Verona, buon compleanno Presidente Putin, che oggi è il suo compleanno. Buona serata a tutti.
Владимир Владимирович, спасибо, что вы есть.
Lasciatemi cantare perché ne sono fiero, sono un italiano, un italiano vero.
Lo avete visto nel filmato, il professor.
You saw Professor Antonio Ballico, the main organizer of this event, the president of Banca Intesa Russia, and the president of the association Conoscere Eurasia. It's a great pleasure for me to give him the floor without ado. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, let me welcome all of you to this 11th Eurasian Economic Forum in Verona. I wish first of all to thank Federico Guarina, the mayor of Verona, for joining us and for hosting us in this beautiful Gran Guardia Palace. The prefect Salvatore Mulas and Ivana De Tricca, the head of the police, that are carefully protecting us. And I also wish to thank all the volunteers that helped us, the Economic Forum of St. Petersburg, all our partners, Credit Bank of Moscow, the Region Investment Fund, Roscongress, PIF, Rosneft, Gazprom Bank, as well as our main sponsors, Banca Intesa, Pirelli, CC Accenture, and Profi. And I also wish to welcome the Secretary of State of Belarus and Russia, Christine Balovaya, Veronika Nikishina, the Minister for Trade of the Eurasian Economic Commission, Elena Budistova, the head of Gazprom Export, Zhong Yang, the Secretary General of ATTN, Stefano Manservisi, the General Manager of the International Cooperation and Development of the European Commission, Andrei Sandrik-Shoki, the President of the Italian Industrial Confederation, the President Andrei Kostin, the President of Dobe Bank, our Ambassador Pasquale Terracciano, who did so much in the organization of this event, Sergei Razov, the Ambassador of Russia to Italy, the Ambassador of the Muslim Republic of Islam, Meki Sanai, the Ambassador of Afghanistan, the Ambassador of Mongolia, the Ambassador of Uzbekistan, and the first President of the Uzbeki Senate, Sadiq Safai. I also wish to thank, of course, the Vice President of the Council of Ministers and Ministry of the Interior, Matteo Salvini. We have today here a representation of 90% of trade with Russia and the Eurasian Economic Union. Representatives of real businesses that had to deal and still have to deal with sanctions, waiting for politicians to identify a new and more reasonable form of multipolar cooperation. I also wish to thank my friend Romano Prodi, the president of the Federation for Collaboration Among Peoples and the Scientific Committee of the Forum. His participation in the following special session and his analysis of the geopolitical context will certainly be an important opportunity for a serious discussion. But I also wish to thank Igor Sechin, the President and CEO of Rosneft, and the first session will be dedicated exactly to this topic. And I'm very pleased to him here because his presence and contribution made this forum the most authoritative opportunity to discuss cooperation between Italy, Russia, Europe, Eurasia, and China. The world economy requires major reforms that can reflect the needs for a fair and equitable and inclusive economic and social development, more open to Eastern countries, and attributing a greater political role to Eurasia from the Atlantic to the Pacific. That's why it requires new forms of international governance that should lead or come from a complete change in the strategy of the World Bank and the IMF. Not to mention, of course, the major impact of migration of desperate people from Asia and Africa into Europe, coming from the catastrophic wars that have been devastating Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and Syria for too long. Countries where international terrorism is supported by countries that call themselves bulwarks against a threat to democracy. The old continent is still pursuing an international geopolitical strategy of its own to protect its own economic interests, which are not necessarily the same of the USA. In 2014 and to this day, international relations have been affected negatively by the sanctions imposed by the US and Europe to Russia, which had a negative impact on the world economy, considering the centrality of Russian Federation in its international geopolitics. In this complex and delicate context, we have now this 11th forum that is a platform for dialogue among businessmen of the whole of Eurasia, hoping to reach a great interaction between Europe and Asia with the support of China. This may lead to other opportunities for other countries that want to have free trade with Eurasia, China, Japan, the Middle East, North Africa. So in the long term, the idea is to have a major market, large market, that is governed by compatible rules. It would really be a great waste, a great loss if Italy were not involved. That's why there's a need for a major effort to guarantee economic growth and social and political stability of all countries by influencing also European policies. The diplomacy of business with the Pacific is central to this conference, and that's why we talk about innovation here, the art of innovation. Innovation is necessary not only in terms of technology, important as it can be, but it has to affect also the way in which we address problems, perform tasks, and establish relationships among the various geopolitical operators. Innovation means having a new vision of reality to be able to identify future options. Several governments, including Italy, have criticized the American and European sanctions to Russian Federation. But unfortunately, every now and then, these sanctions have cropped up again. This is why, more than ever, we have to take action, all possible action to abolish them, at least in Europe. We expect the Italian government on the 13th and 14th December European Council will make its voice heard and convince other countries to eliminate these sanctions or at least vote against them. We must very quickly move from mere words to action. We hope that the economy of trust, diplomacy and business will force European Union and the Eurasian Economic Community to start cooperation. That's essential for a world to have good prospects of economic growth, political stability, security and peace. Thank you very much.
Ringraziamo professor Fallico per questo suo
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Fallico, for your very active considerations that opens up the door to the first topics of our forum. We are going to talk about a very important issue, the economy of trust and energy security of Greater Eurasia. We know that a key element in the geopolitical questions involving all the world, basically, is oil and energy resources. So we have to ask ourselves how this key market is changing and what can be the main consequences of these changes. I'm therefore very pleased to give the floor back to President Sechin for his opening presentation.
Уважаемые участники и гости форума,
dear participants, let me welcome you to this 11th edition of the Eurasian Economic Forum. We have here today with us politicians and businessmen that play a key role in the economy of their country and in the development of regions and the whole world. This is evidence of the importance of the topics we discuss here and the importance of this forum to discuss important issues concerning energy security in Eurasia. I wish to thank the organizers indeed for choosing this topic, which they call the economy of trust. In spite of that, I think there's a major difference between the creative work made in building up this economy of trust and what really happens in the world economy. In a few months, it will be the 5th anniversary from the moment when the illegal sanctions against the Russian Federation were implemented. In 10 days, sanctions will be applied against Iran, even though, judging from the dynamics of the oil market, it seems that there will be some derogations for American businesses. Energy is really in a key historic moment. That's why I'm very pleased to colleagues for their availability and their readiness to discuss these thorny issues during our forum. Today, I don't want to go into assessments or forecasts. In the past year, there has been some quality changes. Price conditions have improved, and yet, as I said several times, the task of building up sustainable development is still far from being solved. But let me start from the sanctions. This phenomenon of sanction is still to be investigated and explored, but sanctions are now so frequent and varied that they have taken up a different characteristic. We feel that this is not this is an attempt really to change completely the market situation in favor of those who promote these sanctions to weaken their competitors. The choice of the sectors to affect speaks for itself. Energy, metals, cooperation in the technical and military field, banking sector. These are the main sectors where Russia and the USA are in competition. The reasons why sanctions were applied indicates that the ultimate aim was to force countries to change their internal and foreign policy rather than really calling into question responsibility for the business sector. The American attitude, and I'm referring to decree number 13660, that restrictions aim is not to punish anyone, but they are a way of putting pressure and increasing the price that Russia has to pay as long as it stands in its own policy. The European Court has made a decision against the sanctions in the case of Rosneft, the Rosneft case, and this showed that it's a highly political issue, the purpose of which was to exert influence on the oil sector, which is so important for the Russian Federation's budget. The sanctions must concern concrete events or violations, and none of this is present in this case. The restrictions to our company are growing. I would say that this is not a real form of sanctions, but a completely it's an attitude that is lacking facts at its base. You remember this book, Treasury Wars, it's the beginning of the new era of financial struggle. Treasury Wars, the beginning of a new era for financial struggle. Being high official of the U.S. administration, the author was a testimony of the policy aimed at reducing or cutting down the financial position of the U.S. opponents. So terrorism has been used, if you like, as a way of opposing competitors. This restriction did not concern companies that control 1/3 of oil production. Some persons in the market and even countries became hostages of this situation. So there's no room for an equitable dialogue. We have to get ready to the political impact of these unilateral sanctions that will lead to a loss of a large market share by many of the businesses involved. This conclusion seems quite obvious to me. The United States have lost just 0.16% of the losses brought about by these sanctions, whereas Germany was affected in terms of 40% of the same loss. So the question that arises quite obviously is that this probably was an attempt to protect U.S. producers. In the past, we talked about Total leaving the Iranian project, and now many European companies have stopped cooperating with Iranian partners. That will probably lead to a complete ban of imports of oil from Iran starting on November the 5th. This rhetoric is an obstacle to capital movement, increases investment cost, and this probably has become one of the reasons for the Saudi Aramco decision to leave IPO. The present supply of liquids is about 100 million barrels a day. However, we couldn't view this as a sign of a long-term effect. We have no ways to guarantee the stability. These treasury wars waged by the U.S. are going to bring about major imbalances in the oil market. If we add to this the reduction of obstructions in Venezuela, instability in Libya, the drop in the supply of oil in the fourth quarter could be 2 million barrels a day. Recent news talk about the large amount of exports from Iran to China, and in accordance with our sources, it should be a large group of ships carrying about 20 million barrels in October, November this year, even though the usual amount is 1.3. This 0.3 million barrels, this brings about a major imbalance in the market. Apparently, the U.S. have their own perception of the role that they have the right to play in this process, and they act as regulators of the world market. OPEC, on its side, had to reduce its market share to the benefit of the U.S. shale oil. So the OPEC Plus production dropped by 2 million barrels, whereas in the United States, it went up by 2.2 million barrels a day. And indeed, in the United States really want to become major oil exporters. So we would have something like a U.S. PEC, if you like. And indeed, in the light of recent events, the relationships between Russia and USA and Saudi Arabia is really very strong. In last May, contract was signed for over $300 billion. So this is quite probably going to be the same trend in the future. It's not surprising that experts are starting to say that sanctions will not impact would have no impact of new production, even though the withdrawal of Total from Iran and the sanctions against Venezuela, Chile, China, and Libya are an obstacle to these new projects. I do not agree with Goldman Sachs analysts who claim that the rhetoric of sanctions does not imply an increase in oil prices, because shale oil producers and OPEC will have a chance to launch new production. So I think that that's a mistake, a misperception. The recent data of the U.S. Department of Energy agencies claim that free production potential in OPEC countries does not exceed 1.4 million barrels a day, and 1.3 million come from one country, Saudi Arabia. The potential to use still available is the lowest in the past 10 years. Oil prices increased significantly, mostly because there was fear for this possible evolution, and any negative development might trigger off another significant sudden growth in oil price that will block the economic growth process of the past 10 years. That will be a damage for all, including China and India, but especially the poorest countries. At the end, those who are going to pay are going to be also European and US consumers. Historically, global cooperation until recently has resulted in a win-win strategy. So both partners, both participants in the world economic system were actually having an advantage. Over the past 30 years, free trade increased by 65%. And this was an important stimulus to global growth. However, the US has taken up a new strategy now, a win-lose strategy, where protectionism has some temporary effects that are beneficial only for one of the sides. The debt for extraction companies have been reduced thanks partly to this increase in prices. But there's a conflict of interest when the US for decades have mistaken their role of regulator as with the role of protecting their own interest. But we know from history that this attitude has also another impact. In the early 19th century, the time of nationalism, there was a monopolization